No?
No?
What?
Did you turn it on?
Okay.
I'll come down, okay? Well, actually, you see it's Helmut's name on there. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
The day did not start too well, I heard. I'm sorry for this. But for the participants in the competition, things happen. So we will see where the Sichtung fits in. Because we did already talk about the philosophy of our club. And you do remember our simple rules. It's always the German Shepherd first. Then it is the members. And then it is the club. And here now, these things sort of come together. And you did see this before. And we said there is this chain, this causal chain. You always start with training, then you screen, it comes to selection, and then it comes to breeding. And then the animals, puppies who are there, are raised, comes to training, they are screened. It always goes around like this. So today we're going to talk about the screening. And we do, of course, have different things for screening as a trial. But we do have, and this is very unique, and this is only RSV 2000, we do have our sightings, our Sichtung. And you saw this before. So the judging has changed. The Schutzhund one is difficult to achieve, and we want to have, in order to have a wide, broad gene pool, to make it easy to start breeding. So we came up with our Sichtung. And the one thing you need to know, every dog who comes to a Sichtung at the age of 4 to 5 months, 7 to 12 months, which is only optional, but who comes to a Sichtung at the age of 12 months is not evaluated. We describe this dog. There is no failing. This is something you really have to think about because it's very unusual. Because on the one side we say, well, we want the really good utility dog. And then all of a sudden we say, you can't fail. If your hips are okay, your elbows are okay, you did some DNA, you went to a show and you received a result good, and then you come now to our Sichtung and you can't fail. How does this go together? Remember, I said it's not about champion breeding. It is really that we want the data of all these dogs. And so after Sichtung, you can breed once with them. So the Sichtung has several parts. And everything we explain to you now, we will show right away afterwards in practice. Because then it is easier to understand. So we do have a mental part. A mental part is a short Schutzhund training session. Standardized lectures, standardized exercises. Of course, we do adapt them a little bit to the dog. And in practice, Helmut will explain how we do achieve the result. So then we have a very big part on anatomy. And believe me, this is a lot better than any show. It's a lot more precise, a lot more criteria, a lot more things that are defined very clearly. So really, this anatomic part is very interesting as well. Who of you goes to a show very often? I mean, now a confirmation show, not a trial. Okay. You have some more. You go to shows, don't you? Yeah, so raise your hand. You know? Very good. So, you will see that when you go to show, you have the normal thing that you run in circles, usually pretty long, You have your dog, you show your dog, and then the judge comes up and he mumbles something this, well, this dog is overall a very nice experience, very nice, we see this is sire, then it has got a strong head, and then the back line could be a little bit better, and maybe the croup is too short, and in movement, this dog has a perfect back, something like this. And then you go home, and maybe you have a possibility to read this once more, mostly not. In a Sichtung, we describe every single detail, and you get it afterwards as a PDF. And we will show you this in practice as well. And all of you who say, I'm not interested in show, I'm only interested in working, you will realize that it can be very, very interesting to know something about anatomy, adding up to what you know about the mental abilities of your dogs. So the mental goes first for two reasons. First of all, we think it's more important. And we always start the mental part in a Sichtung because we don't want the dog to be tired by the time we start the mental work. You know, when you did the training outside and some of you had their dog standing at the side and watching, by the time the dog has his lesson in practice, he is tired. He's not interested anymore. He thinks, go to the shade, give me some water, and leave me alone. So it's a lot harder for the helper to motivate the dog. So we want a fresh dog, so we always start with this part first. So then we have some other things. We put the dogs on a scale, and today maybe we can, the dog that we were going to show, maybe we can go to the clinic, you know, and put the dog on a scale and get the kilogram. Then we measure the dog, height, length. I think we measure the, what do we call it, all around the chest as well. We take photos of the head and of the dog standing. And this again is something we want to have the dog the way he positions himself in the way the standard wants this to be. We do not want pictures of dogs who have been shoved around a little bit here and a little bit there and take out the leg and then pull them up and do it 5 times, you know, just correct them all the time and pull out the back hand because this is not what the standard requires. So we want a pretty natural but correct picture of the dog and we'll publish it on our internet site. And after that, the person comes with their dog. We have several stations, several places when we do a Sichtung, and they come up and we have a big questionnaire asking everything. We ask, are there any other dogs in the household? Are there any other animals? How is the dog kept? More in the house, more in the garden, more in the kennel, what percentage? Then we ask about any problems in feeding, maybe about digestion, is there sometimes diarrhea? Then we look at we ask any diseases that have occurred so far. Usually there is nothing because they are young dogs and it's very fast done, it's quickly done. We talk about the first heat in the females. If it's a bitch, who already had puppies, how many, were there any stillborn puppies, any surgery that has been done, any x-rays, and then we take the dog, we look into the ears, we look at the skin, we look here if there's anything on the elbows, and we all write it down. Just for longer, for the future, if we have collected all the data, to maybe realize there's a problem coming up in the breed, or this or that is fine in the breed. And of course this is data that might be very interesting for science as well someday, if the number of dogs we have questioned becomes bigger and bigger. So these are all the things that we do during the Talentsichtung. And before we do this now in practice, I have to show you a different file. Let me see. Why does it not show this? think I have to change something with my monitors. Let me see. Okay. Here we go, and now it's too late. So why is this not here? Okay, so I just copied one from our page. The forms we use are a little bit different because we do not do it directly in our system yet. This is something we are still developing. But I made a PDF of a page that we have on our site, just an example, for you to know what is going on. And I will just explain the structure. Just that you know how the structure works, and then we go to practice right away, because I think that it's easier. But if you don't get this, you will not understand the practice. Okay? So the first things that we already have put down, if somebody applies to be in the Sichtung, of course, we do know the name of the dog, we do know the sex, we do know the date of birth, we do know the name of the mother, the name of the father, we know their breed book numbers, we know the owner, and in here we put the dog handler. And then we write down some things that you always have like on an identity card, like we write down the breed book number of the dog, if we already know there's any show results. So then if the dog still has a tattoo, we write in here the tattoo, we fill in the chip number, and then anything that we already know about. So first we go for the color and the hair type. Like in this case, it's a black and tan dog, long hair. Are you kidding? This is not correct. That's always good to look at these things, you know, and suddenly you realize that the dog you have at your own house has suddenly a long coat. Nothing against a long coat, but this dog does not. So there's a mistake here. It's probably a problem in the system. So then we put down what we had already, later we will have on the internet what we found out in the wither height and all the measurements we made. And we fill in everything that we already know concerning hips, concerning elbows. So it's all on here. Then these are the results that show up. But the system, I hope you can see a little bit, is always the same system. Now this whole metrics, and this is just an example, and it's cannot be seen very well, I'm sorry for this. We always have 5 criteria for everything that we describe, 5. So if in the first part here, it says, you can read it, I can read it, I just tell you. Manners without stimulation. It is an exercise, very easy. We will be out there in the dog ground, and everybody is standing there, and the owner of the dog comes with his dog on just normally, just walks with the dog on a leash, a loose leash, just like going for a walk. And then the dog enters the ground and walks between the people. And now we describe what we see, but not with our own words, but we take the possibilities we have. Now, there is the possibility that we can say balanced or active. So it can be a dog who just walks in there because he's used to doing this, or it's a dog who says, hey, I'm really happy that we are going here. So this would be the middle. Both describe quite a normal German Shepherd. Okay? So this is the middle. Then it goes up, and we say the dog is very active. And it goes up once more, it's hyperactive, or even fidgety. Oh my goodness, what was that in German? So that I have an imagine. He's very, yeah, he's acting a little bit hyperactive, a little bit silly, you know.
Frenetico? Frenetico?
Probably in Spanish, you're right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, it's okay? Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So, we again decide, now is it more, then it goes up, or we have two possibilities. If it goes down, it's less. We have uninvolved. Yeah, I follow you. I go with you because you, yeah, the other end of my leash, but actually I only walk in here. Or we have rejecting, shy, sluggish, insecure, uncertain. I've never been here. I don't know what's going on. Why do you go here with me? So this is the other part where it's getting less of what we want. So we just make a little cross and we don't evaluate, we simply describe. And now we do this on the 5-part criteria for every 5 parameters for every criterion. So let me take just another example. If we have like prey behavior, which is the running and arm swinging, so the helper is running and swinging the arm and giving, as you learned it, with soft movements, the prey attraction, the prey signals. And now we call this exercise drive intensity and optimal attraction, prey defense mix. So it is an optimal work for the dog, which you never should forget that in a Sichtung, at the same time, this is motivating the dog owner because it is a very great lesson for the dog. The dog can really learn something. And the ones who work at the Sichtung are the best helpers we have. It's not just anybody who comes and says, I'd like to do that. We really have the best helpers, and now, Sandro, if you're a very good helper, still I have to tell you, you could not do this right away. Because we would show you the standard of, this is not a question only of quality of the helper can do, but the helper needs to know what he has to do. But this is something to be learned. You can be trained. But this is really a very, very good lesson for the dogs. And if I take this exercise now, I have several possibilities. I can say high intensity balanced nerves. This would give 5 in the middle is the 5 is the best possibility. So high intensity, the dog really follows very well in prey drive, but he is very balanced. He does not overreact, not underreact, and he's really in the prey drive. So if it goes up, it's still very, very intensive, but there already are some conflicts. You don't know why there are some conflicts. Maybe it's the training, maybe it's in the dog because of the nerves. We simply describe, we do not evaluate. We only say, yes, very intensive, but there are some conflicts. And then, if it goes even up, it's hyperactive nervous. So, the middle, 1 up, 2 up. And as it's nearly always 5, it can go down 2 as well. So, down would be, requires much stimulus, it's low intensity. So if the helper really goes with his waves, he needs to do a lot to have this dog in prey drive, or maybe more than for the average dog. And then it is little activities when the dog hardly reacts to this. This would be the lowest. And like this, we have 25 criteria for the mental part, and something nearly to 70 for the anatomy. I believe you. It's less. I exaggerate it. He has, of course, because he does it all the time, he has the figures in his head. 17 for the mental part, 57 for the anatomy. So it's always the same system, and then it adds up to points, and you can have 1,000 points for the mental part and 1,000 points for the confirmation part. So, of course, you realize that with 17 and 5 is the highest, doesn't really add up to 1,000. So you can see that some things we consider to be more important than others. So behind, it's always 5, 3, 1 that you can get. 5 in the middle, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, if it goes down again. There's a factor behind this. Some things are more important, so it's a big factor, and some things are less, but this is something you can see. So let me give you an example of anatomy. If we are talking about the fact that a dog is in a very good condition of feeding, and it gets a 5 because it's optimal, is this in anatomy as important as the way the dog is able to move? So there must be a very, very low factor behind the feeding and a high one in the way the dog moves, right? So this is always, and even if you then think, oh no, my dog has maybe a pigment on the lips, less points, you know, it's not that high. Even if it says always 5, 3, 1, 3, 1, always the same. Is this clear for you? Okay. I think it will be more clear even if we go up. So then you have adds up, and on the page it will show that in this case you have here the results of the talent sighting, which was on the 10th of November in 2012. And then you have the mental abilities. And what we're still missing in the internet is what we have on the forms that we put everything in. Of course, it refers to the colors. And we do make a difference here in the mental abilities, for example, as well. We have an orange for the social behavior, for the leadability, for the aggression, and for the prey. So there is the most you can get for social behavior in a talent system is 150 points. This dog had 150. Then it is the leadability to 100. This dog had 100. Then it is aggression, and the dog achieved it all. So where did he miss? Oh, he only had a 390 of the 400 he could get in the prey drive. So this adds up to the points that you can see all together now. And the same here for confirmation. The general appearance is the maximum of 300. He got a 295. Then in details of the maximum of 300, this one had 296. And in movement, he got a 380 out of possible 400. So this is just an example. And you will see how it adds up when we do it for one dog after this. Why do we do all of this? There are several reasons. We have activity in our club. People love to show their dogs and get the results in detail. We get a lot of information. We get a lot of information, especially if there are several progenies of a dog, and this is the interesting part. And then, maybe someday, we can give all this information for somebody who's good in molecule genetics, and they can find out if maybe on the gene there is an allele which will say, well, in this position, on this certain gene part, we do have an allele for aggression, for leadability. And then we could do more and know more in breeding. So this is the far, far away target. But you never know, because these things move on very, very quickly today. And But this is one reason why we collect the data. Besides, simply, as we said yesterday, it has to be fun. So this is really what we're trying to achieve with our system. Are there any questions? Do you want to see it in practice?
Yeah.
So you need to say which dog.
Yes.